Hello my dear friends, you're on the Military Summary channel, and today we will discuss the situation in Ukraine on the 14th of December of 2023. Today we have a lot of very interesting geolocations, a lot of very interesting updates and so on, and probably one of the most important ones are coming from Moscow, where Vladimir Putin had his own speech. He was talking with people, and according to him there will be peace in Ukraine just when the Russians achieve their goals, and these do not change: denazification, demilitarization, and the natural status of Ukraine. Furthermore, Putin added that the number of forces of Russian army that currently involved in the operation is around 617,000 people, so significant army, more than 500,000. Now we are moving to Ukraine. We also got a lot of updates. Before we start with the situation on the ground, where you will be surprised. According to information we have, during the previous day the Russians made a significant number of strikes all over the entire Ukraine with Kinzhal missiles. The Russians and the Ukrainians are saying that explosions took place in the vicinity of Kiev. Other sources were saying that explosions took place in the vicinity of Zhytomyr, and according to some sources, 3 Russian Kinzhal destroyed the Patriot air defense system today in the city or in the vicinity of the city, and these strikes took place in Starokonstantinov, the airport that Ukrainians use for Su-24, Su-24M that are able to attack, that are able to carry Storm Shadow and Scalp cruise missiles. And the most important thing, that the Russians during the day were attacking Ukraine, the territory of Ukraine, just with Kinzhals. And we understand that all of them got the target, obviously. And for the first time since the beginning of any Russian attacks, the Ukrainian Minister of Defense didn't provide us the numbers of results of Ukraine air defense work, because obviously the Ukrainians don't have anything to show. They haven't managed to shut down even a single Kinzhal missile. So basically they took a decision not to lie, because obviously it's going to be discovered by everyone. Now let's move to the situation on the ground. We have already discussed the updates from Krynki. A few more things about Krynki that I believe I need to add is that according to Putin, Russia is interested in Krynki situation because Ukraine lost their elite infantry there. Everything as we discussed in the previous videos of the military summary. If you remember, we discussed a lot that the Russians are trying to keep the foothold, allowing the Ukrainians to send and more forces. We were talking the same words. Maybe Putin follow military summary channel, who knows, but we were using the same phrases, the same words, that this is one-way ticket, that the Ukrainians are losing elite infantry, and so, and this is the truth. This is the truth. The Ukrainians are losing power, and obviously at some point the Russians will have possibilities to counterattack, because according also to Putin, Odessa is a Russian city, and it's obviously impossible to take Odessa without returning back to Kherson, Nikolaev area, and so on. We will bypass Zaporozhye. Just one important thing from this territory is that Ukrainians have redeployed 46 Air Mobile Brigade to Marinka area. So another step to decrease the forces and the level of army in that direction. And according to Ministry of Defense report, the Ukrainians on Zaporozhye and Kherson direction lost 45 and 40 soldiers appropriately. So the level of losses is minimal, but we see that the situation, at least in Bradley Square, is getting worse and worse for the Ukrainians, because they have already redeployed from this territory 47th Mechanized Brigade in direction of Avdiivka, 116th Mechanized Brigade in direction of Avdiivka, and 46th Air Mobile Brigade in direction of Marinka, where currently the most fierce clashes are taking place. And the 46th Air Mobile Brigade, take a look at this icon, has already published their video how they were bombing and attacking the Russian forces in the western part of Marinka. On this video we see FPV drone strikes against Russian infantry. So this is on the bottom right corner. You can find the icon of that 46th Air Mobile Brigade. So like this is the reality. But the Russians from their side also attacked the Ukrainians in the area between Georgievka and Marinka. On this video we see how the Russians managed to discover the movements of Ukrainian commandos or reconnaissance team somewhere in the forest, and as a result of FPV drone strike, that entire team was destroyed. A little bit further in direction of Georgievka, basically inside of Georgievka, the Russians were bombing this small building, this one with RBK 500 and artillery rounds. So we see that the Russians are moving and changing changing their focus from the western outskirts of the city to the eastern outskirts of the village by the name of Georgievka. The same story on the north, another building that the Russians reduced to ruins with the purpose to clear the territory, to clear the passage for further offensive operation, and to complete the battle for Marinka for 100%. But these updates are not the most important. When talking about this territory, currently the Russians are trying to make clearing operation in this wide square. They're clearing this territory with FPV drones, with artillery strikes, and after they finish the clearing operation, they're going to start the ground operation. But obviously this is not going to take place, let's say, this week or the next week. Obviously the Russians need a month or even two to complete the clearing, and only after that they will be able to start. But we get a lot of updates from the line between Marinka and Pobeda. Today the Russian sources published the video of the ground operation of the storming this fortification area. So for now we have 100% proof that the Russians managed to establish control over this territory and to get as close as possible to Pobeda. Some sources are saying that the Russians managed to enter Pobeda itself, but yet we haven't received any geolocated confirmation, and the only confirmation we have is the entrance inside of this fortification area. We have a video. We will not watch the video fully because there are a lot of casualties and killed Ukrainian soldiers as a result of that attack. Just a few scenes from this territory, how the Russians were storming along the road. Anyway, the Russians managed to penetrate Ukraine's defense belt, and basically the Ukrainian defense in this area has been collapsed by the Russians, and they're continuing advancing. But this is not the only update from this territory. Another video we got a little bit to the south from Marinka, from original direction. Another video of Russian storming operation among the fields. On this sense we can see how the Russian infantry were clearing the trenches along this tree line, and as a result of that operation also the Ukrainians were defeated and were forced to drop their positions and to run away, saving their lives. On this video we can see the Ukrainian soldier who was running away from the main battle, trying to save their lives and so on. So according to these two geolocations, as a result of clashes during the previous days, the Russians managed to establish control over at least this territory. So from now on, this area, and according to like other mappers like Syriac and the Deep State, this territory will be colored in red. When talking about these two areas, we have geolocations, and when talking about the territory of this line, we have just confirmation from different mappers like Syriac and Deep State. We don't have any geolocated confirmations of that. So we see the Russians are pushing in direction of Pobeda and Novomikhailivka. When talking about Novomikhailivka, as you can see, there are a lot of updates. There were lots of updates, and the most important ones is that the Russians were this morning, or maybe the previous morning, or those days, the Russians started artillery preparation with RBK 500, the Russian aviation cluster rounds, and that was the beginning of the operation. Also the Russians during the clearing operation were bombing this territory and attacking this territory with FPV drones. So basically the Russians have bypassed the first phase of ground operation, of the offensive operation, aviation bombardments, artillery bombardments, and FPV drone strike, and after that the Russians, I was very surprised, launched the ground operation in this area. The Ukrainian sources, first of all, the Ukrainian sources published that video. On this sense we can see this is the video from Marinka, this part from Marinka, and the second part is from Novomikhailivka, this one. On this video we can see at least 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 tanks on the outskirts of Novomikhailivka, even more. There was 5, 6, 7, 8 tanks on the vicinity of this area. Some of them were destroyed, some of them managed to land the infantry, and the Ukrainians are saying that they managed to repel Russian attack, and after they managed to destroy a significant number of armored vehicles. We will not watch the video till the end. If you have access to the map, you can take a look at the video, but most important thing, you need to take a look at these scenes, and it's very difficult to geolocate this video based on this footage, but some of guys managed to do this, and according to the video, just pay attention to few things. To take a look at the mouse cursor. This is the first tree line, this is the second tree line, and this is the forest on the horizon. If we return back to the map, the Russians managed to bypass and establish control over. This is the first tree line we saw in the video, this is the second one tree line, and this is the forest that we might see on the horizon of this video. Once again, let's get back. So this is the territory. So as you can see, as a result of Russian offensive operation, they managed to get the outskirts of Novomikhailivka. Basically, the Russians were moving along this road. So they were attacking along Sukhoy Yala River. They got this territory. During that attack, of course, the Russians lost some tanks, some armored vehicles. They managed to get this area. After that, the Russians landed their infantry on this territory, and their main purpose of the Russians was to enter this tree line, this one. We will discuss this tree line in a second. So the Russians landed their infantry and they established control, or at least entered this tree line. After that, the Russian tank returned back to the mainland. So that was the operation, and according to this video, as a result of that attack, the Russians managed to establish control over this territory. And from now we have the Russians, according to geolocations we have in the past, the Russians have two footholds, one of them on the south and one of them on the north. The southern geolocation the Russians managed to establish control over a few days ago. We got the video how the Ukrainians managed to destroy a significant number of Russian armored vehicles after they landed infantry and after infantry captured the tree lines and the fortifications in this area. But that was the first geolocation, and currently we have the second one. So basically, according to these two geolocations, the Russians managed to enter, as I understand, the eastern part of Novomikhailivka, and basically the ground operation in the village has started. But I'm not saying that the Russians managed to get this part of Novomikhailivka. Maybe they haven't managed to do this yet, because the main purpose of that attack that the Russians managed to implement wasn't to enter Novomikhailivka. The main purpose of that attack was to enter this tree line and this fortification area. Why is that? If you take a look at this map, you're going to see that there are a lot of fields, a lot of tree lines, and one of the most powerful and important Ukrainian fortification is located in the area of Zverinets. We discussed this fortification many times in the past. It has its own title, Zverinets, and basically the Russians tried to storm this area from many sides, but most of their attacks were repelled in the past. And now the Russians took a decision first to cut the main supply road that goes inside of this fortification by this attack. And now the next Russian step is to move further to the north along this tree line, while they're able to get this interception of the tree lines. And if they get this area, the Ukrainians that located in Zverinets fortification will be encircled. Now the Ukrainians have few options. First options is to start counterattacks, trying to force the Russians to step back and to restore control over the main supply road, or to withdraw their positions in Zverinets and return back towards and withdraw their positions towards more reliable fortifications. So this is the current situation, and the Russians have almost created a cauldron in this area. According to the Ministry of Defense of Russian Federation, as a result of clashes on the South Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 90 soldiers and 2 armored vehicles. Once again, the Russians penetrate Ukraine's defense belt on the line Marinka-Pobeda. The Russians penetrate the Ukrainians' defense belt on the line Marinka-Novomikhailivka. And let's change the color. The Russians managed to penetrate the Ukrainians' defense belt on the line Marinka-Novomikhailivka. The Russians managed to cut the main supply road that goes from mainland in direction of Novomikhailivka as well. Situation for the Ukrainians is critical, and we'll see what is going to be next. Now we're moving to the north. We got also a lot of updates from Avdiivka direction. And the most important updates that we haven't discussed, because the southern updates we have already discussed, are coming from the north. We got the video from the Ukrainian sources. According to information we have, the Russians managed to develop their positions along the railways in direction of Ocheretina. This video that you can see in front of your screen was prepared and published by the Ukrainians FPV drone squad Korn. On this video we can see how the Ukrainians managed to discover the Russian stormtroopers along the railways, and as a result of FPV drone strikes, that the Russian forces were stretched and were forced maybe to step back, or maybe they managed to damage them, or so on. So the most important idea is that the Russians, as a result of offensive operation clashes during the previous days, managed to get this line. Obviously they managed to develop a bigger front line, bigger foothold, maybe even to capture the entire sector, but the only geolocations we have are coming from this territory. So this is the Russians' result, and they continue. The most important idea, they continue advancing further to the north, in direction of Ocheretino, and their main plans and their main goal on this area is to establish control over this sector. If they can do this, obviously there is a very high chances and possibilities that the entire Ukrainian defense belt in this area will be collapsed as well. According to information we have, as a result of clashes on Donetsk direction, the Ukrainians lost 265 soldiers, 5 armored vehicles and 6 artillery systems. When talking about Bakhmut, Artyomovsk direction, we haven't received lots of updates. The Russians, after they managed to establish control in the vicinity of Bogdanovka to the north, to the northeast, to the southeast, the Russians currently took a small operational pause for regrouping. Obviously, this operational pause is not going to take like days or weeks. I expect that maybe even this weekend the Russians will make first attempts to attack this fortification area. So we'll see. The same story we can find in Solidar direction. The only changes we got for today, the only clashes took place in the residential area by the name of Chernobylets. The Russians were attacking this territory and we have already discussed this. Once again, Solidar, no changes, another operational pause for regrouping, but very soon the Russians will renew their attempts to attack. When talking about Liman, according to information we have, as a result of clashes on this direction, the Ukrainians lost 180 soldiers, 3 armored vehicles and 1 artillery system. As you can see, there are no geolocations from the ground, just the only geolocation we have from the Ukrainian side, how they were storming the Russian positions on the west of Dibrova. So this is the third video from Ukrainian side, how they were operating and attacking the Russian forces somewhere here. So for now, I'm not changing the map because that video was added softly. The only update we got from the source that event took place somewhere here. Now we are moving to Kupinsk direction, where we also got lots of updates, and the most important ones are coming from Oskol River. The Ukrainians started creation their own fortification area, similar to Russian one that the Russians built in the Zaporozhye direction. As you can see on this video, dragon teeth in front of Ukrainian car. So the Ukrainians are planning and are trying to create one of the most powerful defense belt around Barova. This is the most important logistic area for the Ukrainians that they can use, and they're using for redeployment of their forces on this bank of Oskol River. If the Ukrainians lose Barova, or if there is a risk to lose this area, the entire Kupinsk direction will be collapsed automatically. But this is not the most important update. The most important update is coming from Sinkovka. Today, probably for the first time since the beginning of the special military operation, since the creation of Sinkovka Kupinsk front line, the Russians published normal, big, long, detailed, geolocated video of Russian attack. By the way, sorry, that video was published by the Ukrainians. On this video, we can see 7 armored vehicles, 8 armored vehicles of Russian forces heading in direction of Sinkovka. So imagine yourself the level of attack, and the one on the south. From 7 till 10 armored vehicles were storming Sinkovka from the forest between Liman Первый and Sinkovka, and as a result of that attack there was very heavy clashes. On this video we see the landing operation, how the Russians landed their infantry, and the infantry started clearing the territory. So that video was geolocated, and the building the Russians landed their this is the building where the Russians landed their infantry. The Russians were moving from the forest, so that was something like an attack. They entered this territory using like significant number of armored vehicles, up to 10 units. On this area the Russians landed the infantry, and after the tanks landed the infantry, they returned back to the forest to hide armored vehicles from Ukrainian FPV drones and Ukrainian artillery. After that, the Russian infantry started clearing this territory and attempts to dig in deeper. So basically, according to that video, we can make a conclusion that as a result of offensive operation, the Russians established full 100% control over this territory. If you have access to this map, you're going to take a look at this video. Once again, that video was published by the Ukrainian forces, and that was the video was cut. Obviously, the video was made of a few scenes, and most of them has one purpose, propaganda purpose, to show the power and strength of Ukrainian forces. And on that video on the map, you might see some, let's say, killed Russian soldiers, how the Ukrainians managed to repel a series of attacks. So this is the only things that negative side of that video, but everything The rest of the video show us the Russian progress and the beginning as well ground operation in the village. As you can see, once again on the video, this is the fresh scenes. There are a lot of snow. The territory is covered with snow, so obviously this event took place maybe yesterday or the day before yesterday, these days, something like this. So the Russians started, at least during the previous 24 hours, 2 ground operations, very important ones, one in Sinkovka and the second one in Novomikhailivka. 2, the most expected ground operation that people were talking about for the previous, let's say, half a year, obviously. Furthermore, we got another video of Udaya Daira Day 28. The day started with the losses of Ukrainian forces on the level of 185 soldiers per 1 FPV drone operator, and the day ended with losses from the Ukrainian side on the level of 191 soldiers per 1 FPV drone operator. So basically, we've almost reached 200 losses, and this is about half a battalion just for 28 days. So that means that for 2 months there is a very high chances that one FPV drone operator will kill or wound up to 1 battalion of Ukrainian army. Another important update is the Ukrainians, due to significant problems on the ground, start preparation and building fortifications on the border on Sumy area and Chernigiv area, and the Ukrainians are doing the same as the Russians made in Kupinsk and Zaporozhye direction. So the only question I have, why have the Ukrainians started doing this in the winter period of time, not during the summer or spring? This is the biggest question I have, because no matter regarding the situation that they have already started, obviously they don't have enough of time to prepare 100% powerful fortification area. For now, the Russians don't have any problems to penetrate this territory and to capture Chernigiv and Sumy area, and probably we're going to see something like this at the beginning of the next year. Also important and interesting statistics, according to information I have, there is a very interesting question like language violations in Ukraine. What does it mean? You know that Russian language is illegal in Ukraine, and there are some and people, if you talk in Russian in some public places, you can be arrested by the Ukrainian police forces and so on. And according to these statistics, the highest level of language violations take place in Kharkiv area, Dnipro area, and Odessa area. Once again, Putin told us during his speech that Odessa is a Russian city. And that's it for today. A military summary channel reminds to condemn any violence in the world. Thank you for watching. Subscribe to my channel, put your likes, join my Patreon, and have a good day.